Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building that's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
if you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
And you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
Well, we record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record button?
I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? Good morning, Corey. Is it morning?
Howdy, it's morning, yeah. Based on the fact that neither of us seem to be more than about half awake, it must still be morning.
It must be. I've been, this craziness going on in D.C. has me wondering what
day it is, what month it is.
What time it is. Like, if you hadn't texted me earlier, I was filming something on one of our camera phones, and the date on, or the time on it doesn't automatically flip because we don't even have an account. That's strictly a dedicated
just a camera
on that phone. I'm like, oh yeah, in about an hour, Corey and I got to get on the podcast. And fortunately, you text me, or we would have been doing this about an hour from now. And since we have such an amazing and important guest coming up, that would have been bad.
That would have been bad. Yeah, we didn't want to miss that window.
Yeah. So where do we want to start?
I say we just, you kind of started it already, but you're running pretty ragged. You've been to D.C. a couple times. It's been pretty much nonstop on just trying to get the word out and stay on top of the word from the other side that keeps changing daily. Yeah.
Yeah. What Corey's referring to is in the last 2 weeks, the United States Senate has been trying to let me start all over. The House, a month ago, the House in Congress, House of Representatives, got rid of a public land sale provision that was in the budget bill. That was thanks to some Congress people, one of which who we're going to have on this podcast here in about half hour, said, no way. So it gets stripped out. It goes to the Senate. The Senate starts doing their version of the big, beautiful bill. And Senator Mike Lee from Utah, who is the chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, sees an opportunity because the Senate has said, we can't slow this down. We're just going to have the chairman of each committee do what they call the markup. We're not even going to have a vote. The committee members, just too bad. Once we bundle all this up, you get a chance, you get your one vote for it out on the Senate floor in a week or two. Well, Senator Lee, always taking the opportunity to try to sell some public land to pay his political donors back, came out. I'm sorry, Corey.
I didn't know how deep we were going to go on not sugarcoating things here, but I love to hear that because that's the absolute truth of what's happening.
My trip to D.C. last week, followed by the last 5 days of me having the varnish wore off my face by this, I'm not inclined to be real soft on my impressions of what Senator Lee is trying to accomplish. So try not to swear.
Yeah, he's just found the perfect storm where the president wants to push through this budget bill. And he is saying this has to happen. Let's get it done fast. So they've taken measures to make things happen fast. And he sees that as an opportunity to slide something in when maybe a lot of the rest of the Senate isn't going to have a say in it. And the rest of the Senate doesn't want to stand up and put their neck on the chopping block and say, hold on, we've got to stop this. This is, they've got political power there. And they have to use it wisely. And a lot of them are saying, I can't stick my neck out on this because then the president's going to think it's me that's stopping this. But fortunately, there are a couple of senators who say, you know what, public land is worth that. That's a hill that I'm going to sit down and put a stake in right now. And, but the sad thing is we make momentum, we come out and people have been so great. My biggest concern was initially everyone was just sharing this on social media and nobody was actually making phone calls. People are making phone calls now and it's making a difference. So Mike Lee keeps coming out and changing it almost daily, saying, okay, I hear you. I'm going to go back and revise this. And then he comes out and his revision is just another poor attempt to and I said to you before we started the podcast, but it's not necessarily his proposal we have a problem with, it's his agenda. And that agenda is pretty transparent, that he's not here to make affordable housing. He's not here to cut the budget. He's here to pay back his donors and say, here's a swath of public land that you can afford to buy, and it's going to be cheap because it's public land, and we're going to sell it to you, and you can go and develop it and do whatever. And we see through that. And we have to keep on. And that's the thing I think that's important is we have to keep calling. One phone call it's a daily phone call. Keep calling your senators wherever you are and saying you have to oppose this. Not a single acre gets sold.
Yeah. Well, we're going to try to turn this around as quick as possible, but they want to vote on this in the Senate in 2 days.
Which would be the 27th of June.
Yeah. So last night, I'm up till wee hours a night because everyone knew something was going on because what's today, Wednesday? Monday afternoon, he starts throwing out new proposals, goes on the circuit with all the talk show people saying, oh, these hunters are being paid by a bunch of left-wingers to oppose what I put together, and I would never sell this to the wrong people. It was just like this string of things. And everyone's like, if he is so worried something's coming. And what was coming is he found out that in the Senate, they have a thing called the Byrd Rule. So folks not familiar with the Senate, it takes 60 votes to end the filibuster. In other words, ends the debate and says, let's go to a vote now. And then once they go to a vote, then it only takes 51 of the 100. Well, there's an exemption to that says if it's a budget bill, we don't even do the filibuster. We don't need the 60. We just go right to a vote. So the trick is people like Senator Lee are like, well, I can take all these non-budgetary things and I can throw them into this bill. But you gotta, the Senate parliamentarian looks at these budget bills and says, all right, let's get rid of the stuff that's policy, who knows what it might be, but it has nothing to do with the budget. Well, all of his provisions got thrown out Monday night by the parliamentarian. So he scrambles, and yesterday he comes up with a whole new proposal. It's still a terrible proposal. It still sells over 1 million acres of public land. And under the process we currently have for selling public land, you and I get some benefit out, not individually, but the American public gets some benefit out of it because 90% of proceeds right now get reinvested into other public land. And 10% goes to the state it talks about, okay, this state gets so much and local government gets, that other 10% gets split up. Well, in this bill, he's trying to tell us we're getting a great deal because he's going to reinvest 10% instead of 90. It's like, do you want $90 or do you want $10?
Yeah. And that's just, and I think that goes back to the agenda and the transparency is he knows that 90% gets reinvested. He's changing it to 10%.
Right.
and thinking, well, the regular person doesn't know that, so I can pull the wool over their eyes and make them think, hey, this is a good deal. I mean, this started with him wanting to sell land in multiple states, millions and millions of acres mandated to be sold. The state has to find land, public land, and sell it. And there were no provisions of who could buy it. There were some things you had to live on it for 10 years or something, and then you could do whatever you wanted. I mean, there was just so much, we could see through that. But so he goes and makes a circuit last week and goes on like the Glenn Beck program and talks to him about how great this is. And he's trying to tell us, well, these are, this isn't going to be hunting and fishing grounds. This is going to be, land that's unusable and nobody likes and it's undesirable. Well, then after meeting with Glenn Beck comes out and says, Lee isn't proposing to auction off Yellowstone or pave over Yosemite. He's talking about 3 million acres. That's less than half of 1% of the federal estate. It's remote, hard to access, and often mismanaged. Well, that sounds like about 99% of the areas that I like to hunt is remote, hard to access, and mismanaged. So he realizes on Monday, hey, hunters are having a really hard time with this. I'm going to appease them, and I'm going to change it. No federal land, no Forest Service land is being sold, only BLM, and it's got to be, within 5 miles of a population center and all of these things. He doesn't get it. He says, I've heard the public and I'm changing. Well, you might have heard us, but you weren't listening to what we were saying. Right. We were saying, don't sell a square inch of our public land. And I think fortunately we have some people in the Senate that are on our side, and definitely people, in Congress on the House side that are on our side, that I mean, fingers crossed, and hopefully it doesn't get through. But there's so much going on there that people are trying to push things through and make things happen quickly here. And he's really trying to take advantage of it. And he's really trying to spin it in a way that makes it seem like he's doing good things. But like you said, he tries to take, $1 million and then says, oh, just kidding. It's only 100,000. So it doesn't seem that bad now.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if there's one benefit of having been a CPA and reading tax law that's coming out of Congress every day is I can read through this stuff really quickly. You learn to look for what are the definitions? What does this mean? What are the sideboards? What are the restrictions? And whoever wrote this bill for him, I said this on a video that got published this morning. I said, if this was an attorney who drafted this bill for him, as poorly written as it is, even if I agreed with it, I'd look at it and say, this is terrible language. That drafter, if they went to law school, should go back to their law school and ask for a tuition refund. It's worded that bad. They came up with a new term, population center. There's no definition of what a population center is. So what if there's some place that has, 20...
A post office and a cemetery.
Right. All of a sudden, you're within 5 miles, and there's some really good hunting there. And then you do that. So let's just walk this through. So you say, okay, we got this city. We're going to go within 5 miles. So we go 4 miles out, and we build another population center, right? Another subdivision. Well, then we leapfrog another 4 miles. Yeah. And build another subdivision. And so...
And all of this is in the name of affordable housing. I mean, come on. Yeah. The American people aren't stupid, especially the American people who live in the West and who cherish public land. We know what's going on. It's a land grab. And he's got donors that have deep pockets that have a history of purchasing land, and they've run out of affordable land to purchase. So now he wants to take our public land and give it to them to purchase so that they can develop it. Affordable housing isn't going to be achieved by selling off remote pieces of land. That's going to create sprawl. That's going to create infrastructure issues. I mean, anybody with an ounce of common sense sees through that. So we know his proposal, that's not the agenda. The agenda is not affordable housing. It's to sell land to people who he owes a favor to and to give them an opportunity to get even richer.
Yeah. And so he keeps amending this. He keeps changing it because of the pressure getting so intense, more and more and more, and every day it gets worse. He doesn't have a friend left in the Senate on either side. So he's
because
now
they're all
going
tired of getting phone calls about his horrible idea.
Right. When you look at again, regardless of what your politics are, if you were the president and you're looking at the big, beautiful bill, and where the priorities are to the president in that bill, what Mike Lee is gumming this up with, the president couldn't care one way or the other on that. To him, he grew up in New Jersey. He's not, he doesn't have any context in life to understand the importance of public land. He's got to just be looking at this like, Senator Lee, what are we going to have to, we might have to take you out to the woodshed here, which I hope he does. But, you brought up a really interesting point there about affordable housing. One of the things that was pointed out is, well, if this was going to be for affordable housing, why aren't you restricting who can buy it?
Yeah.
If we really want, because he said, we want farmers, ranchers, and American citizens to own this. It's stated in one of his Twitter or X, whatever it's called, posts.
Yeah, he says we want. He doesn't say we mandate.
Exactly. So I scoured that. I scoured the old language. I scoured the new language today. I was on the phone with an attorney last night. There's nothing in there that keeps foreign governments, foreign corporations, foreign entities from bidding against us. And if you look at his donor list, 3 groups make his top 10 donor list since his political career started in the Senate in 2010. Oil and gas, securities and investments, and real estate. So the open part of his bill that no one's really even focusing on, where I've also drawn to the public land sale part, is he's going to cut oil and gas royalties by about 30%, which is going to cost the United States taxpayer billions of dollars every year.
I thought this was a budget reconciliation bill.
Yeah. So,
and he's putting things in there to cost us money.
Right. I told people, if his staff wants to sit down and talk budgets, I'm your man. Pack a lunch, man. I'll sit here. We'll go through this. But so that addresses one set of his big donors. And then you got to another part of it there is the private equity groups, the BlackRocks, these hedge funds and really big Wall Street money. As another one of his huge donors. And so is the real estate development. Those 3 groups make his top 10 categories of donors. So he's trying to satisfy them all. Okay, I'm going to cut your royalties, and we're going to pay for it in this bill by selling a ton of land that my private equity guys can help with. And then you just real estate guys, you can get in on it.
Yep.
But there's nothing in there that says, you got to break it into half-acre parcels so that a new homeowner can buy it or whatever. There's nothing. So do you think the person working at, they're the mechanic or the nurse or the school teacher, they're going to be able to bid on these lands with BlackRock and private equity groups and foreign companies and foreign countries?
And do you think they care a bit about affordable housing? They care about profit and greed,
right?
Like that, and they're going to come in there. And this parcel of land, say there's 100 acres for sale 5 miles from this ambiguous population center, and the school teacher down the road that's been having to rent for the last 10 years because they can't afford a house sees that 100 acres come up for sale. Even at fair market value, they can't afford to buy it.
No.
It's not like we're talking about, we're going to find a half acre here and a half acre there and sell them, and there's going to be so many of them, everybody's going to be able to afford to. No, a big developer is going to come in, they're going to buy that 100 acres, they're going to develop it into this massive subdivision, and it's not going to become affordable housing. It's going to be just like everything else that's based on supply and demand, and prices are going to be so high that nobody can afford it. They've gotten richer. He's got his political donation for the next time around. And that's what's frustrating is he's working for donors, not the people.
It's all transactional.
That's why it's so refreshing to see that there are senators and Congress people who will stand up regardless of their background or their history, for their constituents, for the people. And that's, as few and far between as they are, the few that are in there are so important to us right now.
Yeah. And, if you look at the political landscape, right? If this was President Biden's budget bill, every Republican was going to vote against it.
Yeah.
And President Trump's budget bill, every Democrat's going to vote against it. So what you really look for are, in Biden's case, were there any Democrats who said, no, I am not voting for this? We know all the Republicans are going to vote against it. I'm going to vote against it also because you got some stuff in there that just violates my principles. So here, we're kind of looking for the same thing, but just a mirror of it where are some Republicans that are willing to buck the party line and say, no, I'm not voting for it if it's in there.
Yeah.
And we started out, and there's another weird part about the law or the proposal he has. Montana is exempted.
So weird. You carve out one state. I wonder why.
Yeah, because he knows that in Montana, you get elected or unelected based on your positions on public land.
Yep.
And we're one of the few states where public lands are that big a deal where you might need to polish up your resume if you're on the wrong side of that. So I think it was June 4th or 5th, my senator, Senator Daines, tried to meet with Senator Lee to say, hey, we hear you're trying to do something here with public lands. Is there a problem you're trying to address it? Let's talk about this. And so I've heard this from people on both the left and the right of how this went down. And Senator Lee was pretty much like, go pound sand. I got the pen. I'm the chairman. You're just going to have to like it. Well, and I think if he could redo this, Senator Daines would not have said, I'm trying to work with Senator Lee to come up with something sane. Because a week later, Senator Lee comes out with this ridiculous bill to sell 3 million plus acres. And he carves out Montana to make it look like that's the deal Senator Daines was asking for. Senator Daines wasn't asking for that. Montanans weren't asking for that. But being a cunning, smart attorney that he is, Senator Lee is like, well, how do I kind of isolate and put on the sidelines?
How do I quiet their voice?
Exactly. Because if Senator Daines were to go to some other senator and say, hey, let's kill this public land bill, they'd look like, Senator Daines, what's your problem? He carved out Montana. Shut up and get in line. We got a bill we got to pass here.
Yeah. So I think it's important, too, to point out. So on the Senate right now, there's 53 Republicans. So the Republicans have the majority. There's 53 Republicans. There's 46 Democrats and an independent that votes with the Democrats. So 53-47, we have to have a majority vote. So there has to be 50 votes to get it to pass. So that means there's 47 that are going to vote against it immediately. We have to have 4 Republicans that are going to vote against it. And if we can get that, it won't pass a majority vote on the Senate. So last Friday, I called Randy, and this was when, things were just at a fever. It was still the original proposal. And I said, what needs to be done? Like, what can we do? And he said, we have to get 2 more votes. We've already got Daines and Sheehy in Montana. Those 2 senators are going to vote against it because they absolutely support public land in public hands. And I said, who's top on the list? And he said, Senator Risch from Idaho, Senator Crapo from Idaho, and then there were a couple more down below that, but those were the 2 most important ones. It was about, 1:30 or so on Friday afternoon. He's like, hold on, I just got an email. Senator Risch from Idaho just came out and formally, publicly opposed the public land sale portion. And I was like, okay, what's next? Like, we got to get Crapo on board. And what was it, 4:30 that afternoon, Senator Crapo from Idaho came out. So we had 4 senators who stuck their neck out and publicly opposed Mike Lee, directly saying, this isn't going to fly and we're not going to vote for it. So that's what kind of spurred him to start backpedaling and changing things, which he did over the weekend. Monday came out. Then he got the Byrd resolution that forced him to drop it. So he had to change it again. So we just have to keep, and we say keep the pressure on. It's not the pressure. Let those senators know, if you're in Idaho or Montana, call them every single day and just say, thank you for supporting public lands. We do not support Senator Lee's proposal. Please do everything in your power to make sure we don't lose a single acre of public land.
Yeah. And no matter where you live, do that to your senators, because right now what Senator Lee is doing, he is on the talk show circuit trying to drum up the media to go after those 4 senators, the 2 from Montana, the 2 from Idaho, and trying to put pressure on Senator Thune, who is the Senate Majority Leader. He's the one person who could override the parliamentarian. So he could say, yeah, the parliamentarian said this is not budget stuff. This is just a bunch of junk that someone wants to throw in here, but I'm going to let it in here. So if Senator Thune is hearing from senators across the country that, hey, my folks back home aren't happy about this Mike Lee thing, Senator, just tell him to, get rid of it. If the parliamentarian doesn't like it, we don't like it. That's really, really important if we can get that to stay that way.
So everybody listening, you've got to call your senators. There are 2 in every state. So you have 2 phone calls to make. Call, leave them. It's just a message. Come on, say, hello, this is Senator so-and-so. Thanks so much for calling. If you want to leave a message about a topic, press 1. If you want to hear our office hours, press 2. Whatever it is, leave a message and just say, Senator, this is my name. I live in this town in your state, and I just want to urge you to please protect public lands. In every way, say no to Mike Lee's proposal to sell public lands. It's that simple. I'll tell you, don't yell, don't scream, don't swear. These are the people that we aren't mad at right now. These are the people that we need to make sure are on our side. Yeah. If you want to call Mike Lee, you can say whatever you want to him, but your senators, be kind. And then also one more phone call is Senator Thune. As the majority leader, just call and let him know I support public lands and I do not support any verbiage that Mike Lee is trying to send over in the bill related to selling public lands. And make those 3. If you love public lands and hunting, you have to make those phone calls and do it every single day until this is resolved. Yeah, that's super important. And I hope that we can get this podcast published and out there before the Senate takes action. They say they're going to try to do a vote on this in 2 days. And I've been asking around to people I know, I'm like, are they really going to be able to get this done in 2 days? And everyone just laughs out loud. So I don't know. Maybe they will. But the other backstop that I've been working on, and that kind of gets into our guest here, who I think is in the green room, or his staff is in the green room. That's our software where Corey and I have this remote platform that where you have a guest, they go into what's called the green room. And I think that's Congressman Simpson's staff. When I was back there, he was out back in Idaho, back in your home state. So I got to meet with Lexi and Lauren and his staff. And they're like, he would love to come on your podcast and let the world know what he thinks about public lands. And I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, really? I mean, he's always been great on our issues, but does he want to stick his neck into the buzzsaw here? They're like, no. Can he do it on Wednesday? This was last Thursday. I'm like, I better call Corey. Corey, you better not be doing anything on Wednesday. I'll change my schedule.
Yeah, we have a congressman who he's so far up the ladder in leadership on the Republican side that for us to have him as a guest and the things that we're going to hopefully get to ask him.
Well, he was an important part of killing it when it was in the House. A few weeks ago, he was a big one that stood up and opposed it and didn't let the public land sale bill get added when it was in the House. And now it's in the Senate. And if it does happen to pass the Senate, it goes back to the House for a vote. And I'm pretty sure that he's going to have the same stance then, that no, that's not okay.
Well, I've asked his staff that before we jump into public lands, can we just get a little bit of background about how he got wolf delisting in Montana and Idaho, and later on in Wyoming, because the bill is called, or the rider that happened in 2011 that put an end to the crazy litigation in the Northern Rockies, is called the Simpson Tester Rider. And his name is in it because he came up with the idea. So here he is, a Republican congressman from Idaho. He picks up the phone and calls a Democratic senator from Montana. And they're like, you know what, this is our chance. We're fed up with this.
And keep in mind, during this time frame, it is a Democratic president, Democrat majority in House and Senate. Yeah. So to get this passed as a Republican is a pretty tall order. It's a stretch to say the least. And so for somebody to stick their neck out and say, we've got a chance, we have to run with this now, and then to actually make it happen, we owe him a huge thank you for being involved in being able to manage wolves at the state level.
Right. Yeah. So they said, oh yeah, he loves to talk about that. So he represents most of East, Southeast, and I think the district goes almost even to the outskirts of Boise.
It is basically everything east of Boise and across that side of the state.
Yeah, and he's been in the House now for 20. I don't know. I think he got elected in 99, or well, I guess that'd be 2000. No, 98 or 2000, somewhere in there he got elected. And he has always been the guy of all the Congress people that are there, that have been there as long as he has. He's the one who just is like, I'll jump in on that. It's like he's unfazed. And I've often tried to figure out, is that just his nature, or I don't know. So
I'm going to let you kind of direct the conversation with him, because you've been to DC twice. You're way more versed on the issues that he's been involved. I'm so hyper-focused right now on public land, and not that you aren't, but you have a much deeper understanding on other issues. So I'm just an Idaho resident that really appreciates what he does to stand up for residents. And that's the big thing that I think politics are so dirty most of the time, and he doesn't seem like a politician. He seems like a representative of the people of the state. Even if it's something he doesn't personally do or value, he knows that his people do, and he stands up for that, and that's pretty admirable.
No, my years of going back there, you kind of learn who's respected and who's looked at as, I'm not doing any, I don't trust this person. No way. He is one of the most respected people on both sides. You talk to the lobbyists who work, let's say, mostly from the left side of the aisle, and the lobbyists who work mostly on the right side of the aisle. Both sides have a ton of respect for Congressman Simpson. I just got a text from his office that he's ready when we are. So we'll see. I'm sure I'll mess up. When I hit this button, Corey, it is going to be so embarrassing if I mess up a congressman meeting, but
just don't hang up on him.
Yeah. Stand by, folks. There might be a little glitch here, but we're going to do this. So hang in here.
An approved wolf management plan, and they had to have 10 breeding pairs in all the states. Well, Idaho and Montana actually did the right thing, and they complied with that. They got a wolf management plan. They had way more than 10 pairs. And so Fish and Wildlife said, Wyoming wasn't complying. So Fish and Wildlife said, well, we're going to delist them in these 2 states that have done a good job and stuff. And then a judge overturned that and said, no, it has to be in all 3. So we delisted what we did is we overturned the court's decision and went back to the original decision of Fish and Wildlife to delist them, and in Idaho, Montana, and said it's not subject to judicial review. So it was a pretty big rider that got on the. Anyway, the wolves got delisted, as they should, even though there's efforts now to try to expand it because they think that there are too many wolves being slain and that kind of stuff, and we need more. We got a lot of wolves in Idaho and in Montana.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing where here you are as a Republican congressman. Then over here you work with a Democratic senator. Yeah. Did the political planets just align that allowed the Simpson tester rider, as it's always called?
Yeah.
Was there a special time that, wow, this is our one time to thread the needle?
Well, I wouldn't say it came about that way. I've known John for a number of years. We've had lunch together and a few things, just because a lot of the interests in Montana and Idaho and Wyoming and Utah are all the same.
Yeah.
So, and I was doing some legislation in Idaho relative to boulder white clouds and stuff, and I wanted to brief him on it so that he was aware of what we were doing. And I liked John. He was a nice guy to work with and stuff, other party. And I wanted to make sure that somehow we made sure we had a Republican majority in the Senate. But I liked working with him, and we just had a common interest here with wolves in Idaho and Montana. So it came about kind of naturally.
Wow. I remember working on that. And when there was a bill introduced by Congressman Rehberg prior to that looked like it had no traction, no legs. And then somehow you guys pulled defeat out of the garbage can and brought up victory. And I was like, are you for real? That's no way.
It was a good win for the states, actually. And the states can manage wildlife. We don't need Fish and Wildlife to tell us what to do with everything, So, yeah. And Montana and Idaho actually did the right thing. A year after that rider passed, people from Wyoming were calling me and saying, why didn't you include Wyoming in this plan? And I said, because you didn't have a Fish and Wildlife approved management plan. Get one and we'll do it. Well, they got one and now they're included. I had ranchers from Colorado saying, why can't we delist them? We're afraid they're coming into Colorado, which they were. Yeah. Why can't we delist them in Colorado? I said, same thing. Get a state management plan, work with Fish and Wildlife. We'll get them delisted. Yeah. So it's worked out rather well.
Well, we, with this being the Elk Talk podcast, and Corey and I both hunting wolves, so like we hunt elk. Corey, you probably get more feedback in Idaho about wolves and how the whole thing happened than anybody.
Yeah, we get quite a bit of feedback on that. Yeah.
Well, you have to live a very interesting life being in Congress and seeing so many things that are important to your constituents. Idaho is a fanatic state about hunting and fishing and all the things they do on public land, riding motorbikes and hiking and horseback riding. And you've always been such a steady person in Congress on public land issues. Is that just who you are, or that comes from who you represent? All the above?
All of the above, particularly the people I represent. A lot of people that don't live in public land states like Texas or somewhere, they think the way to solve the debt and deficit problem is sell off public lands in the West. But the reality is most of us live in the West because we like our public lands. We like to be able to go hunting or fishing and not have to ask somebody permission to cross their property or something like that. And as you said, for all those uses, whether it's hunting, fishing, hiking, biking, motocross, whatever, Idahoans love our public lands. Every poll I've seen, it's like 80%. Doesn't matter whether it's old people, young people, middle-aged people, men, women, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all of them strongly support public lands. I've always been there too, because we used to vacation up in the Sawtooth and stuff. I always consider that kind of like my childhood playground. And I love to get back there, but it is interesting having to come to Washington, where there's, I think, more cars on the damn interstate than there is in the whole state of Montana or Idaho. but that's the frustrating part. So we do get to come home frequently.
Yeah. Well, Corey and I both come from logging families, so we're about productive land management.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of confusion where when we say, no, we don't want to sell these public lands, we want to manage them. Yep. We want good management. It's easy for people to paint you into a corner of, oh, you're one of these. That's how I would say, oh, you're one of them.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what they really mean by that, other than they don't like the fact that I come from a logging family, worked in a sawmill and going through college, and Corey's got the same background. So when we use our platforms to advocate for productive land management, productive for people, productive for wildlife, it's like that gets lost in these crossfires of public land policy and
that's right.
So
that's right. It absolutely gets confusing. But as I said, the reason we live out there is because we love the public lands. I don't live out there because I like the wind to blow like hell in southern Idaho all spring long, But these public lands are vital, and everybody owns them. People in Idaho will say, "Well, they're our land," and stuff like that. Well, actually, all the people of this country own it. And a few years ago, there was a resolution, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago, there was a resolution from our legislature to give Idaho all the public lands and everything. So I had CRS do a report on what Idaho gets to maintain our public lands. The secure schools, the PILT payments, the other things that we get, the fact that they pay for the wildfire fighting unless it's on state land, which is a huge cost and stuff. Put it all together and sent it to the state legislature, and they said, well, maybe not. I don't think we can afford this. It's expensive. But you're right. What we've got to do, and it doesn't matter who the managers of these public lands are. We complain about the management because we're all great quarterbacks and know that, armchair quarterbacks watching how it all comes down. But no matter who managed it, we'd complain about it to some degree, and sometimes rightfully so. If the state managed them, it would be the same thing. If they were in private hands, then I'd have a problem having access and that type of thing. Yeah. Our job here is to make sure that Forest Service, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service are managing to the best interest of the public, and they're not trying to make it more difficult stuff. And the only way we're going to get at this wildfire problem that is in the West, that's every year now, is to actually manage the public lands. And we can do that. We put $75 million into the last CR to build fire breaks in California and Southern Oregon and stuff. And they tell me that those really work. But if we could put that money into management up front, where we actually thin our forests and stuff. Right now, we've got so much dead wood on the forest floors that when one of these fires starts, it's going to get out of control. Yeah. And somehow you got to reduce that. So we can do it if we just, I think, change our management strategy.
Yeah. Do you think people have the stomach for the hard work that comes with managing lands and coming up with the ideas and the compromises to make that work? Because it seems like we're either let's lock everything up, then nobody should be there on one far extreme. And then we have this is just too much work, let's sell them on the other extreme.
Yeah, you do. I think, if you look at the Forest Service or the BLM, either one, the one complaint that I hear, and this is from some of the older foresters and so forth, is that they went into forestry because they wanted to go out and manage forest. They wanted to be outside. They spend about 75% of their time now at computers answering lawsuits and stuff, and all that kind of stuff, and reviewing forest management plans and stuff. They want to be out in the forest. I want to help them get there because we do need more active management and stuff. And I think we could reduce a lot of the accidents we have, a lot of the wildfires we have, and that kind of stuff, just by being better prepared. These are good people. They're just doing a job we've hired them to do, but we've gotten off track. And so I think the new leadership in the Forest Service is great, and we're going to see how that works out. I know Tom has, been active in Idaho and Montana, forestry and so forth. I think he's going to do a fantastic job, and because he's going to bring some of that private sector initiative to the Forest Service, which sometimes gets too bureaucratic if you don't have that kind of interaction. I'm not saying you can do everything like if it was a private industry and stuff, but there are initiatives that we can do which will help in the long run. And I think people understand how important it is, and I think Forest Service and BLM understand it. They just need direction.
Yeah. A lot of times when I go back to DC or when I deal with some of the regional offices, they want to do certain things, but you brought up a point that seems to get in their way, and that's litigation.
Yeah.
Is there a path of how we can, no one wants to get rid of legitimate concerns, people bringing those forward. But where I live in Montana, we haven't had a Forest Service timber sale or even thinning or management action go without litigation. I can't remember the last time we had one that was not litigated.
Yeah.
And it takes years and years and years to work through all that litigation. And then it's the same end result anyhow. The court eventually decides with the Forest Service. By then, we've lost 5 years of productivity and more risk and more fire and more weeds. And any path forward on that?
I don't know that there's a path forward, but we've got to reform the Endangered Species Act, NEPA process, and some others, because we set up a process, while initially thought to be a good process, has created a system where every single step along the way you can be sued, or you didn't consider this, or whatever. And it's just, that's the way of even if you don't win in court, the delay sometimes is worse than the problem. So that's, as I said, I don't know that there's a simple answer to that. It's something that I've certainly been, and I want to preserve people's right to have a say in how their public lands are managed. Yeah. But when we're using it for, there's a rule here on the floor of the House that, you can make a motion to adjourn to slow things down. You're mad about something like that. You can do that like twice. After that, it's considered obnoxious and you can't do it anymore. So until the next day, So deleterious motions. Kind of the same thing here. We need to give people a say in how their public lands are managed. If they got a problem with the decision that was made, great, bring it up, all that kind of stuff. But there ought to be a limit to it, so that we can get on with managing our public lands. I think it was in several years ago in Montana, where they had a plan to reduce fire hazards around communities and stuff like that. And that was going to involve cutting some trees down.
Yeah.
Every time they got sued, none of those plans went through.
Yeah.
So that's just crazy.
Yeah, it's 2 miles from my house in Bozeman. Yeah. The entire Bozeman watershed is at risk from a catastrophic fire. And they've identified it as our greatest risk to our water supply. Finally, last summer, we got some clearance on that, and it's great to see that it might get completed.
That's the other thing, is it takes so long.
Yeah.
And I asked the chief of the Forest Service. Now, this is amazing. This was the chief probably 20 years ago when I sat on the Resources Committee. But in the Interior Committee, I asked him, he said, when you make a decision to, say, do a timber sale, and you spend all the time and money and everything to make what you believe to be a good decision on this, I said, how much of the money of the total cost of that sale is spent making a good decision, and how much of it is spent trying to defend it against a lawsuit? And he said, well, depending on the decision, because they're all, different. He said, but usually about 25% of the money is spent making a good, sound decision, and 75% is making it bulletproof in court, which never works. You can still go to court with a bulletproof thing, So that's a problem. And then we've got this EJA law, which was passed with the best of intentions. Yeah. It was to give people a say in how their public lands are managed, and you didn't have to be a gazillionaire in order to sue. If you went to court and you won on part or all of your decision, the federal government would pay your legal costs, so that people that didn't have the multiple resources could have a say. Yeah. Best of intentions. And now we can't even get a list of the settlements that are made, who's making the payments, how much the attorneys are making on all these EJA funds and stuff. That's got to be reformed. There's a way to screw up anything. They've done it with an idea that really had good intentions, but is problematic right now, obviously.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've been focused on is there's land sale language in the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee bill right now that might end up in the bill that comes over to your chamber, the House. And my congressman is Congressman Ryan Zinci. And Congressman Zinci has always been very blunt, very clear that we don't sell public lands to pay for our spending problems. Yep. And I don't know, maybe that's just too simple of a statement.
It's not too simple. That's a bottom line. It was, I've been working closely with Ryan on this. Ryan's a good friend of mine. He's really the initiator of this public lands in public hands bill and our caucus. He said to me, "Will you join our caucus?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You're good. You're vice chairman." So we fought to get the proposal out of the House bill.
Right. Yep.
And it's not because, and in the Senate bill, they've made it a gazillion times worse. And frankly, if it comes back to the House with that proposal in it, it won't pass the House because Ryan and I have both told our leadership we can't vote for that. And it's not that, the transfer of lands between the public sector or local community and the Forest Service or BLM, that happens all the time. Yep. But it's not done on 4 million acres or 3 million acres that they're talking about in the Senate. It's done on Clayton, Idaho. You know where Clayton is. It's along the Salmon River. It's a little town of, not even a town really, but it's got like maybe 50 people that live there. Their funeral site, their
cemetery,
that's the word I was looking for. Their cemetery was on Forest Service land. So they would have to go get permission from the Forest Service to bury someone in there. So when we did the Boulder Wildcats, we gave them that land.
Yeah.
Those kind of things are okay. And there's a process that you can go through. Some people say the process works. That's okay. If it doesn't work, let's change the process. But we need to have a clearer understanding of what the heck you're doing. And so I think that I'm really proud of Ryan and the stance he took on this, and I was glad to be by his side.
Yeah. Well, I think Corey and I both are thankful that we live in states where we have people who represent us who are very firm in that position and don't leave a lot of wiggle room. It's not ambiguous. It doesn't sound like someone trying to play both sides of the fence. You've all just said, no, this is where it is. This is.
I've told our leadership, I said, I don't draw many red lines. This is one. It's in the bill that comes from the Senate. I'm going to have a real problem voting for it. I don't think I can.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's great to hear. So one of the other things and you kind of touched on it, is there are mechanisms to address some of these concerns. And the one I always hear, and I don't live in St. George, Utah. I go through there. Everyone says, well, St. George needs a new water system, and the BLM land is what it is. Well, we do have processes. I've seen many, kind of like the one you referred to about Clayton, Idaho, where we can solve those. We have under the Federal Land Management Act, Policy Management Act, we have process to do that.
Yeah. And maybe they're too complicated and take too long, and maybe we need to reform those processes to make it work more efficiently and stuff like that. But that's been going on since the beginning of time. We adjust park boundaries and stuff like that, and all of that type of stuff based on the needs of the local communities and stuff. And there is that process that they can use and have used successfully in a lot of areas. If you're doing it if you go to Stanley, Idaho, problem was you couldn't work in Stanley and live in Stanley because there was no place to live. And that's a pretty, not Stanley itself, but it's in Custer County, right next to Blaine County, where Sun Valley and everything is. So things get a little expensive and stuff. But we had to give them in this, or we were glad we did, a few acres to build affordable housing on for the people that come there and work, particularly in the summer and stuff, So those kind of things happen all the time. But I've never seen a proposal where you guys have to go sell 4 million acres of public lands. Somebody called and was yelling at my staff in Boise that I had voted for a bill that allowed for the selling of 800,000 acres in Idaho. And so I wasn't really a public lands advocate. And we kept trying to say, no, I've never voted for that bill. That's what they had put in the Senate bill that I had never voted for, and neither had either of my senators or anything else. I don't know where they were getting this message, but there is some crazy stuff going on out there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I go to D.C. I've been there twice now.
Now you know why crazy stuff is going on out here. You've been here.
Yeah. Well, and your staff, Lauren and Lexi, were so helpful. You all were out on recess that week I was there. And for me, going there and meeting with people who actually are there doing it, dealing with it, helps me find what's really going on. I'm not relying on some clickbait website or whatever. And with you and with Congressman Zinci, it's been pretty easy. Your staffers are very clear, very upfront. When John Bach,
that's our job, is to hire a really good staff. I've always said that a really good staff can make a mediocre congressman look pretty good. So.
Well, it's great that we have people in Congress who feel the way that they do. You've been in Congress for what, 25 or 26?
27 years this year.
Wow.
Yeah, this was not an intended trip.
Really?
But every time I get something done, I understand that there's more to get done.
Yeah.
I'm still in the goal of trying to get Idaho salmon back to Idaho that are on the endangered list.
Yeah.
Talk about your fishermen.
Yeah.
They need these salmon back. Plus, we need them because of Idaho, I think, has more places named after salmon than probably any place on earth.
Yeah.
And what are you going to tell your great grandkids when they say, well, why did they call it Redfish Lake? And why is it the Salmon River? And, all that kind of stuff. And what did you do to stop them from going extinct? So that's an issue I'm still working on and working with the West. And it is a controversial and proposal to try to get salmon back. I'm willing to do anything that it takes. So we'll keep working on that. Yeah. So that keeps me going and drives me on.
You would be classified as old school, I think, because not necessarily speaking of age. I'm grayer than you are, but you seem to be one of those people who are not afraid to step into issues that have some controversy, and you try to sort out what's best. Yeah, and
that's what you have to do. Yeah. Before we in fact, we never introduced anything. We just published a bill on salmon runs and stuff and what was needed to save them. And we had over 300 meetings with user groups, with people of all sizes, people who thought I was nuts, people, And our idea is what we need to not look at in the West, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, is the way things are right now. What we ought to be looking at is what do we want them to be 50 years from now? Because the decisions we make today will make that determination. And if we want to be nothing but concrete and pavement, that's a decision that's going to be made now. So we need to look at what we want in the future. When you look at major changes, people, understandably, people don't like change, basically. But when they look at changes, it is unsettling to them, to say the least. But that's why we just put out a concept and said, okay, you guys, let's debate this in the West, because it's the Pacific Northwest that is going to make those determinations of the things that might or might not need to be done to address an issue like this. But it's a public debate that's got to happen. So we're proud we started that debate.
You have, and you've been right in the middle of it. One last thing, if we have time, your position in the House, being in, you guys call it approps, right? And
appropriations, yeah.
When budgets come to you, there's programs like the Land and Water Conservation Fund that got fully funded and reauthorized under the Great American Outdoor Act, and that has benefited a lot of Montana and Idaho.
Absolutely.
Do you think there's a chance for that to continue with all the pressures of, hey, we got to reduce spending, reduce spending, because that comes from an earmarked source of offshore royalties? What do you think the future, the hope is for LWCF?
Well, while I'm here, it's going to be good. I've seen what LCS, Land and Water Conservation Fund, does. I always tell people that think that this is just an idea for the federal government to buy more land in the West, come and visit me and take a float trip down the South Fork in Idaho. I said, it's one of the most beautiful rivers you'll ever go on, a canyon, and more wildlife down there and everything else. And that wouldn't have happened. There would have been cabins all along that river because I know I would have owned one, But we've been able to preserve it in its natural state and stuff, and it is really cool. So we're going to put in our bill, what they've done in the president's proposal or the OMB proposal is $900 million goes into the Land and Water Conservation Fund, half of it into the state side so that states have access to those funds, and the other half on the federal side. And they've proposed not doing anything on the federal side and taking $387 million of that and putting it into addressing deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is something we've got to do, and we've got to restore that fund on deferred maintenance, but it shouldn't be coming out of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So we're going to fully fund the $900 million. It's our intent right now. We're writing the bill right now, but we're intended to fund that full thing. The problem is when we put those resources in there for that for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, we always have the administrative branch list the projects that they're going to do.
Yeah.
Well, now Forest Service has listed potential projects and stuff. All of the Department of Interior has not listed any projects.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen when we fund that and they don't have any projects? These are things we've got to work out.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I know very often. That what do they call that process? Rescission, or it gets plowed back into the general budget.
Right.
And we want to make sure that money gets used. We're depleting one public asset. If we can use it to improve access and solve all the issues like you mentioned there, the West, Montana. I look at all the fishing act sites in Montana that have been funded with LWCF. It's crazy.
It's incredible. And the sad thing is most people don't know that. If they knew what LWCF had actually done in their communities and stuff, or their favorite camping grounds or whatever, if they knew what LWCF had done, they'd probably have maybe a different attitude. So that when someone comes out and says, wait a minute, that's just a way for the federal government to buy more land in the West, they'd say, wait a minute. It's done this and this and this, Somehow we got to get the word out about how important that program is and what it actually has done.
Yeah. And it's made for our agencies when you can get those in holdings consolidated or get blocks of land that you can actually manage it better than to have these little isolated parcels. And so, that's good to hear. Good to know that there's a chance for that when it gets over to your side.
Yeah, it is. And I'm pretty sure Lisa Murkowski on the Senate side, chairwoman of the Interior Appropriations Committee on the Senate side, feels the same way on this.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. Well, Corey, as we agreed, you said since I'm the guy who goes to D.C. all the time, I get to do most of the talking. So
I'm just a regular guy sitting here, kind of from the sidelines watching everything. But Congressman, I just want to say thank you for your representation. It's, you don't come from a logging background or a hunting background, but you represent Idahoans in the things that are important to us and the values that we hold dear. So I just, from all Idahoans, and especially from those of us who are battling right now on the public land issues, thank you for your stance and for standing up for us.
You bet. I do have a little bit of a hunting background. My dad was a hunter. I used to go hunting with him, but I decided, as soon as you shoot a deer or an elk, then the work begins. So I still went with him, but I just didn't want to get involved in killing something that was going to cost me more work than not. And we always had, my wife and I went to college on elk meat, elk steak and stuff. Oh. So it's in my background, but it was my father who did it. That's why I've got all these dead animals in my office. They were some of his things. I wanted people in the East, when they came out here, I've got a mule deer that is like a 1/4 inch off Boone and Crockett. And it's in my office. When it first came out, a lot of people in the East came up and looked at it, thought it was an elk. Because they've never seen a deer that big, with that kind of horns and everything. And I wanted them to see I got a full stuffed wolf in my other office that the Safari Club sent me. And I want people to see what a wolf is. A lot of people out here think they're like German Shepherds. No, they're big. Yeah. And they run in packs,
Yeah. Oh, well, it is unbelievable that we were so blessed to get this amount of your time.
No
Congressman
problem.
Simpson, we really appreciate it. And I thank Lexi and Lauren for making this work out. And if ever our platforms can help you get the word out about important things for public lands and conservation and hunting, I hope your staff would reach out to us, because we'd we'd cherish that opportunity anytime.
Well, I appreciate that, and we'll be certain to do that. And we can do this again in the future when you want to, especially when some things come up around here.
Great. That's so good to hear. Most of the people we reach out to, they think we're trying to bring them into some sort of trap and say, gotcha. When really, we just want our audience to know that there are people in DC who are speaking on our behalf and representing our interest. Yeah. And you've done a great job of that. And
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Glad to join you.
All right. Well, okay. I know you got work to get back to, so thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Bye. Well, Corey, that was enlightening, entertaining, interesting.
If we could just have more people like him involved in representing us.
Yeah.
He just, there's no talk of whose back he has to scratch or who he owes favors to. This is what the people in my state believe in, and I'm there to make that happen.
Yeah. That was a breath of fresh air for someone. Having been to DC for 2 weeks out of the last 3 months, I still feel like I got to take 2 extra showers a day just to get cleaned off.
I was just going to say, what a contrast to if we had Mike Lee on. We'd have a whole different feeling. Right now, we feel like, all right, our voice is being heard. We're going to win this. And sometimes you see Mike Lee and what he does, and
Well, folks, I got to owe a little apology here because when we got the congressman on, he was like out of the gates going, and I wanted to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hit this button. When I hit record, you'll be on also. He was just on to the races.
He's like, I'm on camera. Here we go.
Yeah, I had to hit the record button, and I think we missed the first 2 or 3 sentences.
Well, Randy said something like, first, if it's okay with you, we want to talk about your involvement with the wolves. And I think you even said, when I hit record here, we want to jump in and thank you and talk to you about your involvement in the wolf delisting. And he just went right in and he's like, the wolf delisting, this is how it happened. And so I saw Randy scrambling to find the record button, and I think we might have missed a sentence or two, but I think you were pretty quick on getting it there.
So I think just the fact that he and actually Congressman Zinci from Montana has offered that he wants to be on the podcast also when calendars align. It's kind of interesting that we've kind of got an open invitation to any policymaker who would ever want to come and talk elk and hunting and conservation on public lands. His staff, when I was back there, Lexi, she said, I apologize, he's back in Idaho this week. The house is in recess, but let's visit. So we talked, and she introduced me to a bunch of his other staffers, and then we followed up with emails, and she just said, you threw that idea out that he'd have an invite to be on that podcast. He wants to do that. How soon can we get him on? Where most people are like, I don't know. I think I'm walking into a trap here. I'm not comfortable talking about these issues, and I don't want to say something that I might make a mistake with. And
I want my spokesperson to make all my comments for me, just so that it's rehearsed and they know what to say. And again, that goes to his character as I'm going to say what's on my mind. I'm going to say what my people are telling me, not my people from a staff or a spokesperson, but my people in my state, my constituents. I'm going to say what's on their minds, and I'm going to say what I'm going to do to fix it.
Yeah, well, he did not leave any doubt as to where he stands on public land. I'm just telling you guys right now, if the Senate keeps that in there, it's dead when it comes over to us.
And we have to have, is it 4 Republicans voting no on it in the House also?
Here's the weird math over there. There are 218 Republicans, 217 Democrats. 220 Republicans, 215 Democrats. But 3 Democrats have died since the election. That tells you how old our elected officials are. They tip it over all the time. It's terrible to say that. I can't. Now I'm going to get a ton of hate mail. So they're 3 or 2 215 is now down to 211. So if we get 5, that takes it from, and that would drop it down to 215, and then add those 5 against it to the Democratic side, because the Democrats have said we don't care,
no matter what.
Yeah, so then we'd win. So you got Congressman Simpson,
obviously,
Congressman Zinci from Idaho, Montana, then Downing from Montana said he's against it. Quite a few other Republican Congress people have said they're against it. Last night, a joint statement from 2 Colorado Republican representatives said, we're not voting for this stupid idea. We're in Grand Junction in Western Colorado. This is what our people do. We have enough people right now in the House to kill whatever Lee will send over there
if it makes it out of the Senate. So the fight right now is in the Senate. We have to call senators. There's 2 in every state. Call your senator, call Senator Thune, who's the majority leader, and let them know you do not support this. We cannot sell. There can be no language in the big, beautiful bill talking about selling public lands. It doesn't belong there, and we don't support it. If it happens to make it out, for whatever reason, Senator Thune vetoes everything and just sends it on through. For whatever reasons, some senators don't stick their neck out like they've said they will. If it makes it through, we've got to circle back around and this fight starts over and we go into the House. And that's when you call your congressman or congresswoman from your state and tell them you have to vote against this. But for right now, it's in the Senate, and hopefully it dies there.
Yeah. And if for some reason we don't get another podcast published before it gets to the House, make a mental note of that. And even if you want to tell that House member now, hey, I know this isn't over there yet, but if it gets there, don't sell any public land to repay Mike Lee's political debts.
Yep.
That's really all you got to say. And so and
honestly, it probably wouldn't hurt to call the congressman or congresswoman in your state now and let them know, hey, this is in the Senate, but if it makes it over there, I hope that you're going to stand up for public lands and not let this get through. So,
right. And that's why the reps from Colorado, I think, came out with that message last night or yesterday afternoon.
They're tired of hearing from people.
Yeah. They're getting lit up, and they're probably like, wait, this isn't even in our chamber over here in the House right now. Why are we the ones in the crossfire?
And I think that's an important thing for people to understand is there is a reason these people come out and publicly make a statement. It's because your voices are being heard. Like our voices are being heard, and they're going to come out and say, hey, we don't support this. You don't have to keep calling us every day. But we obviously know that that's not an option. We're going to keep calling.
Yeah. Or do so at your own peril. But, oh man. Well, Corey, I appreciate your time today. It looks like we're having.
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you there?
Me around for a minute. Yeah.
All right. I couldn't tell if we're having some sort of malfunction or whatever there, but I'm personally having malfunctions right now. I am so tired. You'd swear that I just went and did a 12-day backpack elk hunt, as tired as I am. And all I've done is sat in front of a computer with a phone to my ear, hammering and hacking and carrying on about this craziness. And
well, it's just emotionally draining to think about what's at stake here and to think there are people who make decisions who care that little about something as valuable as public land.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to, my wife, she's been asked a lot of times, when Randy says this is a cold dead hands issue for him, is he that serious? She's like, oh yeah. Anyone who doubts it, he's going down with that ship. You don't know him. And I think a lot of our viewers feel that same way, right? I mean, as we've lost more and more hunting access on private, as development has just kept sprawling, and we're losing wildlife habitat, the one place where every American, no matter how much money you have or don't have, no matter what your job or title, those public lands are a place where you can go, you can take your family, you can hunt, fish, camp, hike, ATV, motorbike, ski, whatever. And when I was doing my prep to go back there, that would have been, I'm trying to remember, I think June 11th, 12th, and 13th. And I'm talking to the lobbyists, I'm talking to staffers, and I was getting kind of the, Randy, you guys, this is no big deal. What? I'm like, you guys have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, no one ever makes a big stink about this stuff. We'll tweak it a little bit, it'll be fine. I'm like, no. You do not, you're not hearing me.
Yep. No, you're hearing me. You just aren't listening. And that's, something Mike Lee keeps saying is, I hear you loud and clear. Well, that's great, but you aren't listening because you're changing it and adding different pieces of public land to sell. And if you're really listening to us, you will hear one thing, and that is not 1 acre.
Yeah. So now those same people, if I could paraphrase, they're like, holy blankety blank. We had no idea. And I don't say I told you so, because that's not the kind of guy I am. But in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe next time I tell you so, maybe you won't poo-poo it. So the beauty of all this is, in my mind, is we've talked in the past about how our issues really are down the priority list in Washington, D.C. And Mike Lee has done something that we've not been able to do in 20 years. He's helped us bring public lands and access and conservation way further up the priority list in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Because all sides are hearing it, from the outdoor rec people, the mountain bikers, the kayakers, us who hunt. They are hearing it from everybody. And, the ability to get that common voice previous to this was like, the old, what they call herding cats, right? Well, Mike Lee pulled it off. Maybe I need to send him a thank you card.
Yeah, when this is said and done.
So
thank you and a farewell card.
Well,
how many acres has the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation opened up to public access?
1.2 million, which is about, with his most recent proposal, the low end number is about 1.1 to 1.2 million.
So of the work of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation in the last 40 years could be wiped out by one man trying to pay back his donors.
Yep.
All of that work, all of the efforts of hundreds of thousands of members of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, of all the agencies involved to create access on public land, one person could potentially completely wipe out.
Yep. In one bill.
That can't happen.
No, can't happen. And, anyone who wants to critique and say, well, you guys are just against everything. You don't want to sell this. You don't want to sell that. We have a process. It's called FLTFA, the Federal Land Transfer Facilitation Act. It's a long word, long bill name. And even saying FLTFA sounds like you got your lips stuck together. But that bill passed in 2000 and it got amended in 2018. And it has done exactly what Senator Lee says he's doing. It has went through and identified lands that are very hard to manage. Okay, there's 20 acres of BLM that's completely surrounded. But no one can get to it. It's full of cheatgrass. We should sell that. We should put it in an account and we should use it to replace with more accessible and easy, better lands to manage. So there's a list. Every resource management plan within the BLM has went through and identified those, and they're on a list. And then it has a process and sideboards that says, okay, if we sell this, 10% is going to the locals, the state and local government. The other 90% is going to be used and get reinvested. And so we have this process that can solve these exact problems that Mike Lee says his bill is designed to solve.
Well, and he keeps hiding it behind affordable housing, and affordable housing is a real issue. Mm-hmm. Selling these pieces of land does not do a thing for affordable housing. It doesn't solve that problem. So he's already picked the solution. He knows what he wants to do. He's just hiding behind something that he thinks people are going to fall for. And that's not. Selling public land is not going to fix the affordable housing solution, the problem.
No.
But he's dead set on trying to convince us that it is. And that's just, like you said, there's a solution for selling public lands that don't make sense for the federal government to own. And, we say not 1 acre. There are exceptions like we're talking about, like Congressman Simpson talked about, a cemetery on public land that, has been there forever. It makes sense to take that 1 or 2 acres, give that to the city or whoever, that goes to. But outside of that, we're not letting go. Like you said, cold, dead hands are holding on to every last acre. And that's just something we can't give an inch on.
Yeah. And for people who say that, well, it could work, or, well, what they do around Vegas, some people may not be aware that in 1998, there was a bill passed called the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act, because Vegas made this same claim. Hey, we're growing too fast. We're out of land. It's all BLM around us. We got to sell some of this. And a lot of are like, wait a second. This is not going to be the big land sale. So let's put some sideboards on this thing. So after a year of negotiation, not an overnight draft by a very poor attorney and the staffer, but after a year of negotiation, it came up that, all right, here's a boundary. There's 66,000 acres of BLM land within that boundary. If you sell it, X amount goes to local government. And the whole premise was affordable housing, was what Harry Reid said. The rest of the money is going to be invested in Nevada for public access and conservation projects. So the sideboards are not nearly tight enough in that one. As much as we thought we'd tighten it up and worked on it, we believed everyone's intention. They've sold 17,000 of those 66,000 acres. I'll give you a guess how much of that 17,000 has been allocated to high density housing.
No, just go to Vegas and drive south.
Less than 100 acres. So we've sold 17,000, and even when we thought that it was tightened up pretty good, less than 100 acres of it has went to high density. What was pitched as, this is what we're going to do with it. So if you ever go to the northwest side or the west side of Vegas, like West Summerlin and all those places out there, and you say, man, I wish I could afford to buy one of these $4 million houses, that was BLM land.
That was the affordable housing.
That's exactly it. That's what Harry Reid put out there, is affordable housing. And
and how much of the 17,000 acres and the revenue from that has actually been put into public land access and conservation efforts? Yeah.
So they've had, I think it's $2.7 billion of revenue from those sales. And a lot of it goes to local governments. That's the other part of these things. All of the locals, the locals are like, wait, I thought I was the one who was going to be next to BLM. I bought this house and this lot because I had BLM out my back door. But if you develop that, I'm no longer the guy who's got BLM out my back door. So to pay off the upset locals, they got a really large percentage of the money. So when I looked at it this winter, there's still $800 million in that account that hasn't been spent in Nevada. And one of the tricks Congress wants to use to balance the budget is to go raid that account. There's $800 million. That helps. So how much of it got spent on conservation? That's a good question. I'm sure it's quite a bit, but under that Nevada law, so much of it had to go to Clark County, which is the county Vegas is in, the city of Vegas. Just all kinds of local money gets funded through that. So there's another example of how we thought we could help Vegas solve a problem. A lot of people got together on that from across the West and said, all right, let's try this. Well, it got amended again in 2008. But it's everyone who looks at it and says, if we do that again, we are going to put deed restrictions on here that it is going to be for affordable housing. Right?
Yeah.
Because now there's shopping malls and there's
and the problem, even with a deed saying it's for affordable housing, the definition of affordable housing can change in the stroke of a pen. I mean, it's affordable housing. So this developer, you have to have deep pockets to be able to come in and buy this land and develop it for affordable housing. And I mean, it's not going to accomplish. And this is what we're talking about, is a very specific piece of BLM ground in a very specific area with a very specific need. What Mike Lee's trying to do is a broad paint stroke across the West saying, you have to sell land, you better find land, and you have to sell it, and you don't have a choice. He's forcing states to sell, or he's forcing federal land to be sold in states that don't have a problem necessarily. And affordable housing is a problem in almost every state, but that's not the problem that this is going to solve.
No, it's anyhow. People might say, what does this have to do with elk hunting? It has everything to do with elk hunting. Because if we don't have access to it and we decide we're going to let a derelict Congress who has never balanced their budget ever continue to give away handouts to their political donors, and we're going to somehow solve this by selling our public land, someday we're going to be standing around. I'll be dead, but younger people be like, wow, we don't have any public land, and we still have a bunch of drunken sailors in Congress spending like fools.
Yeah. How many times have we driven by somewhere and told our kids, I used to hunt pheasants right out in that field? Or, man, elk used to bugle up on that ridge like crazy, and I haven't heard an elk bugle up there in 10 years. That's where this would head. We would be saying that in not very many years, that used to be public land, and now look at it. It's $1 million homes up on the ridge there. It's supposed to be affordable housing. And
right now, all of us can go enjoy those lands. If anyone can convince me that the average American can go and outbid the Chinese, the Saudis, the private equity firms, you really got a sales pitch trying to convince me that the average American is going to win that bidding war.
Yep.
And so you take lands they currently can go and enjoy for free, and you say, well, if you don't like it, go buy one. When they come up for sale, go buy it. Really? Jeff Bezos, he instead of $200 million yachts, maybe he wants a $200 million golf course. He'll buy the whole dang thing. Oh, and here's another part that he left in there. Right, we just went through this big battle about corner crossing in Wyoming, the 10th Circuit. Mike Lee's state, Utah, is in the 10th Circuit. There's language in there that gives priority to the sale and identification of lands in the checkerboard. And you and I
tell me there is not somebody in his back pocket with an agenda to benefit from this.
Right. So he specifically puts it in there, and he says he's going to get rid of it. They didn't get rid of it. The draft this morning, it still says one of the priority type lands are those within the checkerboard. And then this is the part that you or I, if there's an auction of a bunch of these parcels, you and I can only buy 2 parcels at an auction, at any single auction, under his law or his language that's in there today. If you are the adjacent landowner who has all this checkerboard locked up, you can buy every parcel. Now, who are the general public benefits from that, especially now that corner crossing has been legalized in the 10th Circuit?
So somebody who's supposed to be representing the general public is certainly not putting language in there that makes it feel like the general public had any say in it at all.
No. They're hoping that nobody's reading this, or that our reading comprehension sucks, which I'm not saying that mine doesn't at times, and that just the haste and hurry of getting this through, that they're going to be able to cram it down our throats. And I'm so proud of the people who have been standing up. This is like one of those American moments of,
well,
not a chance.
Somebody might say, what's this have to do with elk hunting? I don't think anybody listening is probably going to question what it has to do with elk hunting, because they have come out in droves. And if somebody is listening and hasn't been involved in making a call, please I get it. It seems like my one phone call isn't going to be heard. I promise you, one phone call is being heard right now because it's one after another, and we have to have every voice there to really send the message of how big this is. So if you've not taken the time, go to senate.gov, and you can find out who your senator is. It gives you the phone numbers right there, a picture of them, a little bio, everything about that you need. Do this. Make 2 phone calls to your senator. Make those phone calls. They're 30 seconds each. Tell them you don't support public land being sold. Send an email to those same 2 people. The email addresses, and might even be a form right there. The email addresses are there. Send an email. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I live in this town in your state, and I want to voice my opposition. In the subject line of your email, say no to selling public lands. Just make it that simple. Don't say it. Just make sure they know from the subject line what your message is about. Because if they don't have time to read all the emails, they'll at least see the subject lines. Do those 2 things. Call your senators, send them an email. It'll take you 2 to 3 minutes to change the direction of where this might be going. Yeah.
I couldn't say it any better than that, Corey. You running for office? Can I be your campaign manager?
You saw me when Congressman Simpson was. I didn't have anything to say. Like you had another topic ready to go. Another topic. I just kept on asking him about wolves and public land, and his time is so valuable. So to have a clear idea of some of the topics that he's passionate about and that he wants to get a message out on, you're able to do that. And if anybody was ever going to send a person to Washington, D.C. to be a voice for hunting and public lands, I'll buy your plane ticket every time. I'll even go along and make sure that you don't fall through any shower doors or get injured on the trips there.
Oh, well, that's kind of you to say that. If I think about it, of my first trip back there in '98, how just over time you build relationships, and if you are focused on the issue, I've never let myself be drawn over to this party or that party. I just focus on the issue, and I've built trust with a lot of people who've been back there a long time, and that's invaluable. And so if I can't be useful to the hunting community of, I'm getting older and slower and everything, hopefully I can transition to having some value to the hunting community through all these relationships that I've built and the trust that's there, and provide some voice to that. I don't like going back there. It's not like I raised my hand and said, boy, because I was supposed to be fishing at Fort Peck last week, walleye fishing with Kim.
Your wife is not happy.
Yeah. And so on Wednesday night, we're sitting around. I'm like, honey, you are not going to believe this. Here's 64 pages and 12 of it's to sell our public land. She's like, well, you can't let that happen. I said, well, I know, but that's next week and we're going walleye fishing. Well, you get your bags packed now.
Another opportunity for Kim to be anxious about you leaving town.
Yeah, so I'm lucky that I have a spouse that's as committed to this as I am. But anyhow, if my experience to that gives people some insight, maybe helps them sort through the noise and static that you're going to hear from the far on one side and the far on the other, I just always have felt that my job is to find where the facts and the truth are and put them out there, and people will make up their own minds and own decisions. They don't need to agree with me, but if they have the right facts, that's, that's all I can.
There are certain times to stand up on your side of the aisle and to be on, to one side dedicated on that side. But there are issues that are either like this one. This is, sent in by a Republican. This is supported by a whole bunch of Republicans, not because they agree with selling public land, but because this isn't a hill that they're willing to die on politically. Right. And there will be some retribution. There will be some consequences for standing up against this. You have a president who is demanding this gets passed and pushed through quickly. And if you be the one that raises your hand and says, hold on, we aren't ready yet, take this back, there's going to be people putting pressure on you like we don't understand. And so for the ones that have stood up and that continue to stand up, we have to recognize they are players on the same field that we're playing on, and they're on our side. And that doesn't matter. You know, like you said, we have to sometimes attack people that are on our side of the aisle because their ideas don't support what's valuable to us. And so, I think it's important not to get locked into that. Obviously, you know, we bleed a certain color because of the values that represents, but we can't be so one-sided and so closed-minded that we don't see opportunities to do what's right, even if that goes against what that color might be doing. Yeah,
I always say I'm equal opportunity. If you're here for hunting, conservation, and public lands, I'm here with you. I don't care what you look like, what you talk like, what the rest of your world is about.
And we're seeing that now with groups and, you know, people from walks of life that we typically wouldn't lock arms with and go very far with. They're saying public lands, no, we can't sell that. And their voices are going to the same cause as us. And it's important to recognize the issues.
Yeah, for me, that's what it always is. I've been involved in this long enough to see the hyper-partisan people. Half the time, they're carved out. It's like, if you want to make everything super hyper-partisan, when your team isn't in power, you may as well just go on vacation for 4 years.
No.
Because you're not relevant.
It's a no vote on everything.
If you stay in that middle, if you stay in that middle and say, these are the issues, you're in the respect of both sides, and you get a chance to at least play in the game to some degree. So, well, Corey, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
I got
more battles to fight.
In 6 minutes, I got another meeting I'm supposed to be at. I already got the crew mad at me because I was supposed to film something this morning. But when one of the major leaders of the House of Representatives says, I want to be on your podcast, I don't have that. If there was a funeral or a wedding today, I am still not that busy. This is what we're doing.
That's right. And he gave us, I don't know how long, it was good 30, 40 minutes that he gave us.
That's unbelievable. People are going to call us like, how did you guys pull that off? I don't know. I guess how we pulled it off is we're from Idaho or Montana, and we're lucky to have those kind of people who are approachable. So,
absolutely. Folks,
all right.
Just one more plea. Make the phone call. Make the call, send the email, do it. Your voice is heard. It's so critical important right now.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, folks.